All right, welcome. Thank you for attending. Today is November 7th, 2024, and the time is 10:03 a.m. The Office of Funeral and Mortuary Science Services is now in session for a permanent rulemaking hearing pursuant to its rulemaking authorities provided in sections 1220-204, 12-135-113, and 24-4-103 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. I am Nate Brown, Regulatory Analyst for the Division of Professions and Occupations. With me today are Sam Delp, Division Director, Jackie Arsalan, Deputy Division Director, Sarah Werner, Deputy Division Director, Zin Mayhew, the Program Director, Joseph Berry, Inspector, and Maria Rascon, Regulatory Coordinator. The proposed rules and notice for this permanent rulemaking hearing were filed with the Colorado Secretary of State and the Colorado Office of Policy, Research, and Regulatory Reform on September 23rd, 2024, and published in the Colorado Register on October 10th, 2024, in compliance with statutory requirements. The Office of Policy, Research, and Regulatory Reform confirmed on October 19th, 2024, that the Office of Funeral and Mortuary Science Services did not receive any requests for a cost-benefit analysis. Stakeholders are invited to testify at this hearing, and all comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we request that redundancy be kept to a minimum. Once we have completed the public testimony portion of the hearing, the Division Director will later consider adopting proposed revisions to the rules on a permanent basis to implement the provisions of House Bill 24-1335 concerning the continuation of the regulation of persons related to the final disposition of deceased human bodies, and Senate Bill 24-173 concerning the regulation of persons providing mortuary science services. Specifically, these revisions are to existing rules 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4, revisions to and renumbering of rules 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, and 1.9, and proposed new rules as follows: 1.5, licensure of funeral home directors; 1.6, licensure of mortuary science practitioners; 1.7, licensure of embalmers; 1.8, licensure of cremationists and natural reductionists; 1.9, requirements for provisional licensure; 1.10, licensure by endorsement; 1.11, renewal and reinstatement; 1.12, continuing professional development; 1.13, workplace learning requirements for full licensure; 1.14, workplace learning requirements for provisional licensure; 1.15, credit for military experience; 1.16, disqualifying criminal convictions; 1.17, reporting criminal convictions; 1.18, application for registration; 1.19, registration, renewal, and reinstatement; 1.20, investigations and inspections; 1.21, declaratory orders; 1.22, custody and responsibility; 1.23, standards applicable to preparation rooms; 1.24, rules respecting cryonic preservation; 1.25, rules respecting delegation by funeral directors and mortuary science practitioners; 1.26, rules respecting satellite offices; and 1.27, powers and duties of the director. All right, we will now begin taking testimony. If you do wish to speak, please use the raise hand function within the Zoom, or you can also type in a question in the Q&A section, and we will read it aloud for everybody if that's what you prefer. But for now, I will go and see if we have any hands raised. I do not see any hands raised at the moment. Let me check to see if we have any questions typed in. Nothing yet. All right. Well, we will, of course, keep the line open here just to give everybody a chance to gather their thoughts or type out their question. But in the meantime, I did just want to express our appreciation for you taking the time to come out here and log in and participate in this process. I see a lot of familiar names who have also been participating in the various stakeholder meetings. We really appreciate you being engaged in this process and helping us craft the best possible regulations. Sheila Canfield-Jones asked what changes to the draft rules since our last meeting. There haven't been any changes. You would have seen the most up-to-date version. Although, if you will recall, there were some changes made prior to the last meeting. So, in case you missed that, but this is the most up-to-date version here. And thank you, Maria, for kind of scrolling through. That might help spark some ideas or comments. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands at the moment. No additional comments. So why don't we just keep on scrolling through, Maria, and then maybe if we get to the end of that, we can wrap this up early, but certainly don't want to cut anybody short or make anybody feel rushed. We have plenty of time. Okay, still not seeing any hands. So Anonymous attendee asked, is this the final version of the rule that will be approved, or is it already approved? So no, it has not been approved yet. The Sam Delp, the division director, will still have to contemplate all of the comments and questions, and the final rule will be issued here over the next month and a half or so. And that's because of the Administrative Procedures Act and all the timelines built into the rulemaking process.
And again, just to jump in here, to repeat one of the things that I said at the last stakeholder meeting is that this is the initial set of rules, right? So these rules will be approved, right, barring any other edits, sent to the Secretary of State's office, and these will be the initial set of rules that we use to continue to move forward with the timeline that we've expressed, right, over the last several months, getting ready for application publishing in the spring and all of those sorts of things. It does not mean that there won't be future rulemaking that will be needed to clarify things, to add additional items, to clean up anything, right, that isn't working the way that we wanted to. So there will be opportunities for future rules and rulemaking as the program continues.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Sam, for that context. It's one of the benefits of the rulemaking process is that it's a little bit more flexible than statutory changes. So certainly able to come back in and make edits as necessary. I do see a hand up from Aaron Kucharik. I apologize if I've mispronounced your name, but you should be able to go ahead. I'll give you 3 minutes when you're ready.
I was just going through these real quick, and I want to first thank the director and everyone there at DORA for their hard work on this. Under 1.23, the standards applicable to preparation rooms, A2, the refrigeration, I see that the temperature is still not more than 44 degrees. I believe at the last stakeholder meeting, we had talked multiples, and because of the multiple people saying between 36 and 39 that was being considered for change, did that change potentially get reversed?
No, thank you so much for pointing that out. That should have been changed. So it should have been changed ahead of time. So perhaps we aren't looking at the most up-to-date version, but rest assured that I had made that change and that had been contemplated for sure. So I'm not quite sure what happened there, but appreciate you pointing that out. Certainly, that is definitely one that we had looked at making.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to scroll through and see if there were any others that jump out at me. So
appreciate it. Thank you. There we go. Don't see any additional hands at the moment. We got a written question from Stephanie Blackstock. What is Colorado's position on reciprocity for out-of-state funeral director licensees working across state lines? I don't know if Sarah, you'd like to jump in and answer that question. But my understanding is that there is no real reciprocity in order to work here. Moving forward, you need to be fully licensed here in Colorado. If you're licensed in another state, you could come in under the endorsement process, which is typically an easier path to follow than going through the original licensure. But in terms of what I assume you mean by reciprocity is not allowed. You would have to be licensed here.
Yeah, that's correct, Nate. Anyone who is practicing anything that is within the Practice Act does in the state of Colorado does need to be licensed in Colorado. So as Nate said, you can apply for licensure by endorsement. And what that is essentially, if you're licensed in another state, it kind of follows an easier process. It'll allow you to put in your out-of-state credentials so that we can see that you've been licensed elsewhere. We can check to see if there's been discipline in other states, that sort of thing, rather than applying as a brand new person, but you would need to have a license. There's no direct reciprocity.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Nate, would you go a little bit through the process of kind of what happens after this meeting? I think that would be helpful for this group.
Sure. Yeah. So after this meeting, we'll wrap up the testimony, and then Sam, the division director, he'll consider all of your comments. Typically no additional changes are made after this point, but certainly if Sam sees some things that he thinks should be changed, he could do so at that point. And then the final rule will be filed with the Secretary of State, Office of Legislative Legal Services. They'll go through it, look for any legal issues, constitutional issues, and then it will be finalized and published in the Colorado Register sometime next month. And then in terms of any new changes moving forward, once this process here is finalized, any new changes would have to go through the full rulemaking process, just like we went through here. So there would be notice and stakeholder meetings and another rulemaking hearing at the end of that process. So certainly if there are any other changes after this process here goes through, in the future, any additional changes would certainly be noticed in exactly the same way as it went through here. I hope that answers the question, Sarah.
Yep, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Perfect. Absolutely.
And the newest version of the rules will be posted to our website, so it's all still there in the same place where it has been. The final rules will be posted with the Secretary of State, and we will have a link to that from our website.
And also, even after that, there is another process that the legislature goes through to take a look at these rules, and we'll review them once again next legislative session to see if we've gone beyond our authority. And so that's another backstop for any of these sorts of rulemaking processes that the legislature has. Right. I don't see any additional hands raised or written questions at the moment. But again, certainly don't want to cut anybody off. make anybody feel rushed. We have plenty of time set aside. So why don't we go ahead and give it until about 10:20 until we end this portion. But we will certainly keep the line open in case there's any last second thoughts or comments that you all have. And again, while we're waiting, I just wanted to once again express our appreciation for you all coming out this morning. We really couldn't do what we do without input from the public and subject matter experts. So just want you to know that we really value all of your input. And I will say that somewhat bittersweetly, this is actually the last one of these that I will be conducting here at DORA. I've recently accepted a position over at the Department of Revenue. So you won't be seeing my face on the screen for these sorts of things moving forward, at least not here at DORA. But I did really want to say thank you to all, to everybody on the call, the stakeholders. This has been one of the more engaged stakeholder groups that I've had the pleasure of working with around here, and it really makes my job much more easy and interesting to have such an engaged group of folks.
Sarah, do you want to briefly go through the peer review process? It was one of the written questions. We could do, if you could just do an abbreviated run through of what that generally looks like.
Okay, sure. Nate, can you go down to that rule? The rule on peer review. So you're talking, and I just want to make sure that I'm answering the question correctly. Are you talking about the process for moving from a provisional license to a full license? So the peer review
Right.
process within that?
Yeah, the question is, can you touch on the peer review and how that will work for those applying for a provisional license?
Sure. So, and I just have to remind myself of, just give me a minute here. Okay, so on the screen, Nate is showing where the peer review process is outlined in the rule. The process varies a little bit depending on which license type someone is applying for. So if the provisional licensee is seeking full licensure as a funeral director, they will need to submit proof of having done 25 funerals. And then there will be a process where they need to work with someone who is a certified peer reviewer, or someone who is a peer reviewer as approved by the director. So that peer reviewer will need to verify that the person has completed the task, or that the person is ready to practice as a fully licensed funeral director, mortuary science practitioner, whatever the license type happens to be. So there will be a report or a document turned in that they basically sign off on and recommend them for full licensure. It's not something that needs to take place in person. According to these rules and according to the statutory provisions, it's just someone has to verify that they meet essentially the requirements of moving from a provisional license to a full license. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were looking for, but that is how the process is outlined.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Yeah, really helps put some context for that. Thank you, sir. All right. Well, we have been getting a slow trickle of written questions at least, so we go ahead and keep this open for the next couple minutes just to make sure there's nothing else. Don't see any hands raised. Looks like we've taken care of all the written questions so far. So I will keep this going until 10:25 on my clock, and then we'll wrap this up early. Again, unless there's other comments or questions. Certainly don't want to cut anybody off. Go ahead and give it about 1 more minute, I think.
One of the things that I do want to address, because we've gotten this question a couple of times over the various stakeholder meetings, related to what the liability is for the person who's the peer reviewer. So I want to just briefly address that, right? The peer review is not something that's required to be done over the shoulder in person for every case. So it is not a situation where you are responsible for the practice of the person who you are reviewing. What you're responsible for is an accurate representation in your documentation of the work and the case reports that you've seen and what you know about the practice of the person that you're reviewing. That's what you're responsible for as the peer reviewer. You are not responsible for an over-the-shoulder supervision component of those review, of the people that you are reviewing. That makes sense. So as long as you are in compliance with the provisions of the Practice Act and the rule, and you are not fraudulent in your documentation or misleading in your documentation, then there's little room for a liability issue related to being a peer reviewer.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. All right. Well, it is 10:25, so I will go ahead. Got a question, Sheila Canfield Jones. Will the peer reviewer be abolished after 2027? And then if they are fraudulent, what happens then? I don't know if Sam or Sarah, if you'd like to address that.
Yeah, so the provisional licensure process only exists through 2020. Now I can't think of the date in the law. So the peer review process ends after a certain period of time. I believe it's 2031, which I can't think of for some odd reason, but I think it's January of 2031. So after there is no longer a peer review process, then, after there is no longer a provisional licensure process, there will not be a need for a peer review process. It'll just be the full licensure process.
Now, people have to apply for that provisional license by 2027. Right?
Correct.
So,
yep.
Right.
They actually, yes.
Go ahead.
They actually need to apply, as it currently stands, they need to apply by 2026 for the provisional license. Yep. So that's the one date in there that is 2026. But yes, there is no longer a pathway via provisional license after 2031. I believe it's 2031, and please feel free to correct me if I'm not stating the date correctly.
And to your question about what happens if they're fraudulent, it depends, right? That's where, a case would be opened, right? There could be an investigation. It just depends upon the nature of whatever it is that occurred, Sheila. So, but theoretically, the reviewer could be subject to discipline if they are fraudulent in their reports.
Awesome. Thank you both for addressing that. Okay. Well, since we still seem to be getting a run of questions here, let's give it maybe another minute for folks to get any questions out before we wrap this up.
And let me correct myself here. I looked it up. So you need to obtain the 4,000 hours of experience prior to 2026. That's the one date in there. That's 2026. The application is not until 2027. So you're required to be licensed as a provisional whichever license type by January 1st of 2027, but the experience has to happen before January 21st or January 1st of 2026.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Sorry. Appreciate you clarifying that. All right. Well, with that, I don't see any additional hands. We'll give it maybe another 30 seconds or so before we clear it out. Oh, did you see a hand go up? Michael Wallace. You should be able to unmute on your end. Please go ahead when you're ready. You'll have 3 minutes. Michael Wallace, you should be able to unmute on your end. And it looks like you might be having technical difficulties. So of course, feel free to type out your question. You can just read it that way as well. It looks like you're unmuted. Mr. Wallace, if you're able, please go ahead. Well, it looks like Michael, looks like you're having some technical difficulties. So please feel free to keep trying or type in your question. I'd be more than happy to address it either way. Okay. Yeah, looks like we might be having technical difficulties, but of course, we will read out any comments or questions that you have if you'd like to type them in. I'm going to go ahead and put you back on mute. Oh, still trying.
Nate, would you pull up the rules related to the workplace learning experience? There was a question in the chat on that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Maria, if you could scroll down there, that would be great.
And it's 1.13 if that makes it easy.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, we got a written comment from Michael Wallace having technical troubles. Yeah, if it looks like you're able to type into the Q&A, so if you just want to go ahead and type your comment in there, we will read it out loud and be essentially the same as if you had been able to speak. So I apologize for any technical difficulties, but not sure there's much we can do on our end at this point. And Mr. Wallace, I will just go ahead and lower your hand just so I can keep track of who's waiting to speak. But of course, again, feel free to type out a question or keep working on your mic on your end. Okay, no additional hands. Okay. Michael Wallace, let's try it again. You should be able to unmute on your end. Sir, please go ahead if you're able. You'll have 3 minutes. It looks like you might still be having technical difficulties. Yeah, Mike Wallace, you should be able to unmute on your end. So, unfortunately, I'm not sure what is going on.
And Nate, I just want to make sure that we are verifying that this is the correct version. Aaron mentioned that he's not seeing the 3 of the 6 continuing hours in person, which I know is in the latest version. So
okay, yeah, we might not actually be looking at the most up-to-date version, but let me look. Give me just a moment. And I see, Mr. Wallace, you should be unmuted on your end. So if you'd like to go ahead, you should be able to, but I'm not sure exactly what the issue is. I apologize. Sorry, give me just one moment. I'm looking to make sure that we do have the full final rules for you, I think. Let me just make sure. Okay. So I believe so. There was the question about the hours required. Is that for continuing education? Is that what we're looking for?
3 of them being required in person. The number that's required in person versus the number that they can do online.
Yeah. So the version I'm seeing, Rule 1.11, is for actually renewal and reinstatement is where it has that language that it has to be in person. So you could, yeah, there you go. I thought I had remembered putting that in there.
Nate, can you repeat what the final temperature is? I think it's 36 to 39, but I just wanted to make sure because
Yeah, I believe I don't think I put a minimum in there. I think I put the maximum as 39 degrees.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think we included the minimum. And I still see Michael Wallace. You are still unmuted, at least from what I'm seeing. So please go ahead if you're able.
And I'm seeing Michael Wallace put a question in the chat, so I'll just answer that live. I'm assuming that's the question that you're looking to answer or looking to ask. His question is, may you please explain the reason for the increase to $17.50 for registration renewal? So fees for all of our license types are set based on the cost of providing the service. So in this case, there were some significant changes to the program that require additional personnel. Primarily the requirement for additional inspections. So the new law requires routine periodic inspections as well as inspections at the point when someone applies for initial license and then at the point when a license is no longer current. Because of this, the division needed to hire additional inspectors, which of course increased the cost of providing the program, which again increased the cost of the registration fees. You can see a little bit more about how that's specifically broken out in the fiscal note for House Bill 24-1335, and that is available on the General Assembly website.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate you answering that question. And Mr. Wallace, I'm gonna go ahead and mute you and lower your hand because it just doesn't seem like you're able to speak. But of course, please feel free to keep typing in those questions. Okay. Well, it does seem like we have a couple of questions rolling in here and there, so I'll keep this open, at least for another little bit. See if we have any last second questions here. Looks like all of our written questions have been taken care of so far.
There was a question regarding financial assistance. I am not aware of any financial assistance that is available.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't we keep it open for another minute or so till my clock says 10:43. See if we have any other last second questions. All right. I think we can maybe go ahead and wrap this up. But it didn't look like we had a written comment come in. Mike Wallace, is there a maximum amount that will be charged? The renewal fee increased from approximately $150 to $17.50. I don't know, Sarah, if you'd like to answer that.
There's no minimum or maximum. It is based solely on the cost of providing the service.
One of the things that I will say about the fees is, I know it doesn't feel like it, and we know that it's a large amount of money, right, relative to what has been charged in the past. We haven't set the fees for the individual license types yet. What typically happens, and while I can't make a promise of this, right, what typically happens with a new program is over time the fees come down, because by law we can only charge fees that cover the expenses related to the program, right? So the issue that we have right now is there's no fund balance, right? So there's no money that exists right now in order to fund the inspectors and the things that we need to do in order to comply with the Practice Act, which is why the fees are a little higher. Over the impending renewal cycles, our experience is that those fees tend to come down, right? There's everything that's associated with those fees, right? So that's legal expenses, that's fees for the inspectors. All of those things are included in those licensing fees. So there are 2 full-time inspectors that will be hired for the program, and they'll be dedicated and specific to funeral homes and crematory inspections.
Perfect. Thank you both so much.
And just a quick mention on that, those positions are currently posted. So those are available on the State of Colorado Jobs website.
All right. I am seeing some questions come in that are starting to get us a little bit off track from this hearing here. So if you do have any questions related to sort of the process of the program and sort of how that will look moving forward, certainly you can reach out to us offline here, and we can get those questions addressed for you in terms of what the program will look like moving forward. But I did just want to kind of bring us back to the topic at hand, looking specifically at what's in these rules here. But with that, I also certainly don't want to make it feel like I'm rushing anybody. We have about 15 minutes left or so on our scheduled time today, so definitely don't want to cut anybody off. Looks like written comment is being addressed. I don't see any hands at the moment. It's certainly yes. Once this is all wrapped up today, we will make sure that what we have available on the website is the most up-to-date version. Absolutely. And I apologize for any confusion. yeah, again, we will certainly make sure that we're showing them the most up-to-date version here after we're done. And it could just be sometimes the website's a little bit slow to update, so could just be looking at an old version. Sometimes that definitely happens. And I did just get a reminder that it can help to download the document. That can help make sure that you're seeing the full, all of the various changes and everything. You're not just looking at it online.
There might be issues with browser cache as well. So just make sure that sometimes your browser to load things more quickly will kind of keep old versions if you've looked at it before. So you may want to make sure that your browser cache is cleared as well, just to make sure it's pulling up the most recent version.
Yeah, for sure. Scrolls through to see if any hands have popped up. I don't see any. I don't think there's any written comments that we need to address out loud at this point. Well, let's keep it going until 10:51 on my clock, and we can maybe wrap this up, unless there's any other questions, of course. Right. Well, as Maria scrolls up to the top, I don't see any additional hands, and I don't see any other questions typed in at the moment. So I am going to give one last chance before I close this out. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. All right. It does not appear that we have any additional comments on the webinar, and so we will be moving on. The director will consider permanent adoption of the proposed new rule and will deliberate with the following in mind: the need for the rule, whether the regulation is clearly and simply stated, that the regulation does not conflict with other provisions of the law, that duplication or overlapping of the rule does not exist, or there is an explanation of such occurrence, and the cost-effectiveness and appropriateness of the proposed rule. After the proposed rule is permanently adopted, the rule will be forwarded to the Attorney General's office with a request for an opinion on the constitutionality and legality of the rule. The adopted rule will be filed with the Colorado Secretary of State and Office of Legislative Legal Services by November 30th, 2024, published in the Colorado Register on December 10th, 2024, and will presumably become effective on December 30th, 2024. The public hearing on this matter is now concluded. Thank you for your participation.